Welcome to another conversation on democracy from the historic campus of Washington and Jefferson College. Our guest today is Paul Loeb, expert on citizen empowerment, and on our campus today is a speaker at the 6th Annual Symposium on Democracy. Paul, welcome to W&J.
Hey, very glad to be here.
I was thrilled today to have an opportunity to hear your perspective on how students and others who aspire to change things and make the world a better place needn't be people in positions of power, needn't have tremendous influence, but actually can engage in small things that can make a big difference. Could you just summarize a few of your thoughts on that? I thought it was very encouraging for young people.
Yeah, I think what happens is that people, young people in particular, but all folks, they end up getting caught in what I call the perfect standard, where they feel like they need to know absolutely everything about an issue to act on it. They have to be this charismatic, saintly, eloquent, have everything wrapped up. And in fact, just like most folks really aren't there. And when I look at what we might call the giants of history, for lack of a better word, they aren't there either. They're proceeding despite doubts and hesitations. So I use the example, it was interesting, of Rosa Parks, where most people think, oh, we know her name. I could be anywhere in the world, most people would know her name. And she's the lady on the bus, and she refused to move to the back of the bus, and that started the civil rights movement. And the reality is she'd been already part of an existing civil rights movement. For 12 years, she was active in the NAACP, which her husband co-founded locally, and she was a secretary of it, and she was engaged with other people in a variety of efforts, some of which seemed to bear some fruit, some of which hit a wall and didn't succeed. And one of the many things she did was the stand on the bus, and because she and others had built a whole community, there was a force around to organize after the stand on the bus, and then that created the historic moment that we all know. But if we take that moment in isolation and strip it away, we lose all the meaning of the action and all of her courageous and real work.
I think the stories you told today were actually very helpful in a lot of ways and encouraging to students. Our students have grown up in a time when all they've seen is a deeply divided nation, socially, politically, a nation where seldom do we see modeled the opportunity for people to sit down together and reason with one another or to have real civil discourse. You spoke today about the importance of actually forming relationships, having meaningful understanding with people that you might disagree with, which might feel unnatural to students who haven't seen that model very often, at least on the public stage. What are some of your thoughts on how we go about establishing rapport with people who might be very strongly opposed to our views on certain issues?
Well, it's not easy. Let's put that up front. It's not like, oh, okay, here's the magic key and then everything will be just fine. But I think part of it is people want to be recognized. They want to be heard. They want their humanity recognized. They don't want to be just dismissed. So part of it is like, the question, how did you come to to where you are? It's a good question because it allows people to talk about their own journey. And listening to that, I think that's a forefront, first part of it. And then seeing, is there common ground? I told the story, there was for a number of years, maybe half dozen years, there were gatherings drawing people together across political lines, sort of left, right, center, whatever. I got to participate in one of them. And there's sort of more organizational leaders and folks like that. And there's a very liberal group called MoveOn.org that's been around, I guess, for 25 years, and a group called the Christian Coalition that's quite conservative. It's also been around, and the founder of MoveOn and the director of the Christian Coalition were at one of those gatherings. It wasn't the one that I was at, and they bonded over. They were both moms, and so they bonded over their kids. And, here's the photo of my kids. And, they've got something, you see a little kid running around and, you feel like, yeah, I know what that's like. And they stayed friends and it took a couple of years. And they didn't immediately have an opportunity to work together. And then it was a fight originally around what they call internet neutrality, which is to really make the internet an open commons. So if you're sending out an email, an internet provider can't just say, sorry, we don't like the content of that email, boom, doesn't go anywhere, which actually happens sometimes. And So what happens then is they put together a joint statement. It's really on the edge of, is it going to happen or not? And they says, move on, the Christian Coalition agree that. They ran as an ad in the New York Times, and like, whoa, everyone's head turns. Move on, and the Christian Coalition never agree. So it was finding a place where they could act together.
You and I talked earlier about democracy as the context for any kind of work that any of us might choose to do in our country to affect change.
Right.
And we also are focused on democracy as the overarching theme of this annual symposium.
Right.
We want our students to understand the nature of democracy, democratic institutions, their responsibilities and roles in sustaining those democratic ideals and institutions through their lifetimes. Can you share a few thoughts, maybe in closing with us, on how it is that all of us as individuals play a role in sustaining and furthering our democracy?
Well, I think it has to be participatory, or it becomes hollowed out. And it's hard because certainly there are forces that are not always ethical, not always truthful, often manipulative, that are trying to foster cynicism, foster division. I mentioned there's the 2016 election, among the 10 largest sort of sharing on Facebook stories were stories that were not true, shared by a 24-year-old Romanian who had never been to the United States. So, how do you factor that in? Things that just weren't on, were just provably not true. So how do you factor that in? And I think the antidote to that is people participating, and certainly people listening across political lines. It's people saying, yeah, we know that there's a lot of corruption of the system. There's a lot of things that we don't like that have happened, but I'm going to participate nonetheless. And so in some sense, I mentioned the perfect standard. It's applying the perfect standard. It's not applying the perfect standard to our own participation, or it's not applying it to a candidate. It's like, okay, yeah, it's a mixed bag. Nonetheless, somebody's going to get elected. Let's pick the person I'm closest to. It's a mixed bag participating. I'm not going to be guaranteed results, but let me do my best, try and draw in others, see what I can achieve. And so I think it's in some ways, it's the opposite of starry-eyed idealism. It's living in a world that's going to have some mixed results and knowing that you make change anyway.
Well, we're grateful that you've not only spoken at the symposium, but you're with us for several days on our campus. You've been speaking in classes, having meals with students.
It's been enjoyable.
Some of the content of your lectures and classes come from the work that you did on this more recent book, Soul of a Citizen, one of many books that you've produced over the years. So again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn from you at W&J.
Yeah.
We've been talking with Paul Loeb, author and expert on citizenship and citizen empowerment here at Washington and Jefferson College.